I'm very happy today to introduce Justin Manor. Justin is a co-founding partner of Sosolimited, which is a interactive design studio based in San Diego and Boston. And Justin actually resides in San Diego, so you can interact with him. The studio's been doing a bunch of interesting stuff in sort of interactive visualization and things as large as architectural sculpture, information display through sculpture. He's going to talk about all of that in a moment. Their work has been exhibited internationally in forums such as Ars Electronica, the Walker Art Center, and the Cooper Hewitt. Justin's a graduate of the MIT Media Lab, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Stephen. Thanks to everyone who came. I'm very happy to be able to share with a local crowd the stuff we do. I moved to San Diego just over 3 years ago, but I feel like I'm just getting to know the community here more recently. And so the stuff that Sosolimited currently does, we do a lot of large-scale architectural work, indoor and outdoor, but 5-10 years ago, I had no idea that this is what we'd be doing. So I'm going to start the talk by going through kind of how we got to this point, and because some people always are curious, how does one get to do that? Like, you must know the right people or whatever. But on some level, we started as an underground criminal enterprise, just as DJs and VJs playing warehouse parties and nightclubs and shows. Myself, John Rothenberg, and Eric Gunther, we listened to the same type of music in college, and we were interested in the same kinds of design. And nobody at the time was doing, or at least in Boston, no one was doing shows that married visuals with the music in a coherent way. People would just be playing whatever graphics they wanted next to a DJ who was playing whatever music he wanted. So we wanted to make coherent shows. But we also wanted to go one step further and do themes and bring interesting concepts into our shows. So we made we made the shows really hard for ourselves, and did a lot of C++ programming for each show to incorporate some weird concept. And this was back in the early 2000s, so any video from back then is unwatchable. The audio is terrible. I'm not going to share any of that with you. I can't even watch it. But we do have funny flyers from back in the day, and I'll just try to explain to you what the shows were like. So we did one called The Remote Show, where we took a bunch of infrared remotes from stereos and Goodwill, anywhere where we could find them, and handed them out to the crowd at a nightclub. And we had an infrared receiver near where the projection was, and every button we programmed to do some different visual effect on the screen. We didn't let the audience control the audio. That would have been a little bit too chaotic, but we handed over control to the audience. Also, if something was happening in the news, we would that had media surrounding it that we could incorporate. In LA, there were big wildfires in, I think, 2006, and so we amassed a whole bunch of media surrounding the concept of fire, whether it was positive or negative, but we were doing mashup style performances and shows before that was even a term to describe it. But movies like Backdraft, or even Pee-wee's Big Adventure, when the pet shop catches on fire, we incorporate that in, and we take music and video and try to make a seamless narrative that is projected, both audio and video, for the show. When Putin redeclared himself president, we did a Cold War II show and revisited our favorite 1980s Cold War movies like Rocky IV, Ruskies, Red Dawn, and the appropriate songs from those eras. And we were really into celebrating holidays that aren't real holidays. So Tax Day was a favorite one of ours. And money is a topic that is on everyone's mind, but even more specific than that, taxes. Could we make taxes fun somehow? We weren't the best musicians or the best graphic designers out there on the planet or best video editors, but we just tried to pick something that was interesting and can we turn it into a nightclub show. So you can actually find like thousands of hours of tax content out there, and I'll just share some of the audio with you.
And the government can't do nothing like that. They got certain income tax rules that everybody got to follow. After all, with millions of people paying taxes, the government has got to work like a machine.
Oh, they work like a machine, all right. A vacuum cleaner.
Take a nigga dreams and write them off in they taxes.
What you call money? I pay more in taxes.
I pay more in taxes than you paid in your life because can't say I'm greedy. You can change my taxes, send me to war.
So pay your taxes. Watch on TV.
Thugs, cut taxes, strippers and thugs. It's all.
And you know, we have 90 minutes of this, and you know, we would sample from movies and TV shows like Trading Places, Brewster's Millions. You know, we're big 80s and 90s fans of all kinds of media, and we would just try to do shows that no one else would think was a good idea and pull it off. So, you know, can you play episodes of Golden Girls at a nightclub and have people like really dance like crazy? And the answer is yes, you can. So we had a show called Ladies Night where we picked TV shows and movies where elderly women were the protagonists and really crafted a show around that theme. So like Driving Miss Daisy, Designing Women, Murder, She Wrote, Golden Girls. And also Silly Holidays, we'd like to have throw party during President's Day. And it was actually, we went all the way analog and didn't do any like laptop-based stuff. It was just all about wearing tuxedos and opera gowns, and we hired accordionists to play the music so that we didn't have to do any work. And sex tapes were huge in like 2005, so we collected all the sex tapes, celebrity sex tapes that were out there and did a show about them. So, you know, we didn't really have a plan other than trying to do things that made us, you know, laugh at the time. And the audience responded much more to the visuals than the audio. And while we were doing things, you know, kind of high concept audio-wise, like, it's not like we were selling CDs or you know, it was totally a money-losing proposition, everything that we were doing. And we really wanted to take it farther, but we just kept playing the same old venues and stuff like that. How can we take it farther than where we were, you know, just where we were positioned, doing occasional art festival shows outside of Boston, but mostly just playing in Boston. So we decided, because we'd actually written a large code base to do this audio-visual manipulation, let's start playing with something that has a built-in audience that's not just like electronic and hip-hop music. How can we broaden the scope of the audience? And we thought, well, either the elections or the Super Bowl, but we figured we didn't want like angry football fans coming after us for messing up their game. We just, you know, use our system and poke fun at the elections. So we did this during 2004, Kerry versus Bush, and then 2008, Obama versus McCain. And by that time, we'd actually gotten enough contacts and, you know, PowerPoint presentation pitches to be able to get decent venues and to, you know, work with teams that could help us put the shows together. And so what would happen is during the presidential debates, instead of staying at home and watching it with your friends and your family, you would bring them to an audience at a museum, or so we did it in Boston at the ICA Museum, and in New York at the Art Directors Club, in DC at the Corcoran Museum. So there's, you know, 3 live debates for the actual presidential candidates. Not now, how there's like 2 a week, but these are the, you know, when the final 2 or 3 people are chosen. So we would be on stage with a bunch of computer equipment, and we'd be taking in the live audio and video signal and running things like face detection and doing linguistic analysis on the text that comes in off a closed caption feed. So that closed caption feed you see on the TVs at the bars, that is digitally encoded in the TV signal, and you can pull that out and then run it through text analysis software. We were also invited to the UK to do this for their prime minister debates. They used to not debate each other live on TV, but in 2010 they started to.
In each instance, our efforts at isolation have actually accelerated their efforts to get nuclear weapons. That will change when I'm President of the United States.
Senator, what about talking? Well, Senator Obama twice said in debates that he would sit down with Ahmadinejad, Chavez, and Raul Castro.
So what you're seeing here is each candidate has a word cloud of every word they've said so far. So, up to 10,000, 15,000 for an entire debate, and organizing them in real time due to their frequency and coloring buzzwords to different categories. And so, some of the more popular buzzwords will have call-outs with their frequency there. Not only are we counting the words, we're keeping track of how they're used in context. So if they say something like tax, every sentence with the word tax in it is brought up, or McCain with spending, to see if they're just reusing the same sentence over and over, how repetitive they are, read my lips type stuff.
Have a chance to respond to what the others have said. Well, I think one thing I would like to add is this, that I didn't quite want to imply that none of the political parties have spelt out all the details. Some of them are simply not possible to spell out now, but clearly more work will need to be done. We've gone further than others, but clearly more will need to be done. But something which I think would make a huge difference to us all as we deal with these very difficult decisions about how to balance the books is for once to get the politicians actually working together on this.
If you shrink the economy now, if you contract it, if you make the mistake of the 1930s, then you lose jobs, you lose growth, you lose businesses. We've got to support the recovery until it's fully established, and then my deficit reduction plan, which is a 4-year plan, comes into place. But
So some of the things we do are analytical, and some of them are more geared toward comedy, but involving kind of an undercurrent of analysis. So in the clip previous to this one, you saw how kind of important words that were coming through we could categorize into different emotional forensic categories, positive emotion, negative emotion. So we'd be building up these profiles for each of the candidates and be able to match them up against real profiles that law enforcement or linguistic analysis people use to know, like, oh, is somebody a confident person, or is somebody a pathological liar? And they're not definitive, they're just kind of probabilistic schemes of, if you analyze like 10,000 speeches and you can figure out if the person was telling the truth or lying, then you can build up a fingerprint of word usages of different categories and see if the candidates fall into these different buckets. Or you can just make them say blah, 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 blah.
Our entire Russian approach has to be evaluated because a resurgent and very aggressive Russia is a threat to the peace and stability of the region. Their actions in Georgia were unacceptable. They were unwarranted. And at this point, it is absolutely critical for the next president to make clear that we have to follow through on our six-party,
This one is called You, Me, and the Other Guy. So just keeping track of every time they address the audience, counting that, every time they talked about themselves, or every time they talked about their opponent, the other guy. And everybody always talks about themselves the most, so it seems like we caught them in a little trap, but that's just how it works. Everybody, in any kind of speech, it's almost assured that somebody's going to reference themselves like 3 to 4 times as much as anyone else around them.
And if the Liberals want to cut child tax credits with the Conservatives, then I can say one thing. I will never form an alliance with a Conservative government that cuts child tax credits.
David Cameron. Well, what you're hearing is very desperate stuff from someone who's in a desperate state. But you have heard from Labour and Gordon Brown that if you earn £20,000 or over, you're considered rich. You're considered a target for the Labour government to go on wasting money this year and to hit you with taxes next year. Now let me answer this question directly about inheritance tax. I believe in this country that if you work hard and you save money...
So, you know, like I said earlier, some of the things we do are aimed at legitimate analysis, and sometimes we're just trying to build something that looks quite scary and is like a dystopian future, you know, artificial intelligence reality that might have come from Blade Runner or Max Headroom or something like the dark NSA machine that's being pointed at us. But before they can actually build that, let's try to build our own and point it at them and see, you know, if the audience gets excited. So, you know, we were doing these kinds of performances while we all had day jobs, John, Eric, and I, and they were getting enough press, and, you know, I guess the right people were seeing them such that people started asking us, Sosolimited, the band, could we do stuff for them? And so when the inquiry started coming in, we felt like, okay, that's great. We can quit our day jobs and go full time on this. So, you know, the great thing about doing oddball things is that people only come to you with oddball requests. So we had sort of pre-selected, unknowns to us, like how it worked. But, you know, when people came to us when we were transitioning from band to company, it was just the weirdest things they were asking for, which was great. It put us outside our comfort zone, but we were able to, you know, work on some really interesting things. So one of the first actual large thing we built was a sculpture for the Museum of Natural Science in Raleigh, North Carolina, and they came to us with a brief to fill their 5-story atrium with a dynamic sculpture that made people be overwhelmed by the beauty found in nature. So even before we could, you know, get a concept around that, we just gathered a few thousand images of beauty that we saw in nature, and to see if anything could inspire us to design something. So I think they were coming to us to try to build a moving sculpture that was 5 stories tall, but that just sounded really, like the maintenance sounded terrible, but we wanted to deliver them a static sculpture that was dynamic. So kind of our pitch to them was just a movie. And let me see if it starts up, yeah. So, you know, instead of making a long document that described the details, we kind of put all of our effort into just a very simple, you know, transparent gray rendering, and told them, wouldn't it be cool if you could have this sheet of glass going through your atrium that you could play content across, and it would appear very light and you know, not feel heavy in the space and still span the entire thing. And, you know, it's kind of, you could abstract away the whatever you want to put on there. In this movie we just show birds, but you know, you could play out these patterns found in nature on this display. And, you know, lucky for us, they said, yeah, that's awesome, let's do it. We approve, go and build it. And then we were like, oh shit, we got to figure out how to do this thing. So, I mean, luckily we're friends with a lot of smart people too, and one of our secrets is that we just do part of any of these big jobs. We worked with many different companies and individuals who are like really good people who do electronics. That's Jeff Lieberman. He did a lot of the like communication protocol design and some of the electronics in there. And well, here you'll just see what it looks like for real. This is the final thing. So it's 3,600 pixels. It's 100 feet long, 10 feet wide. There's sculptural cables holding it up that also do data and power. There's these screens surrounding the atrium that give you a little viewfinder into, hey, what am I looking at? This is cuttlefish skin, because they have chromatophore things on their skin that allow them to change their the pattern that's there for mating and camouflage purposes. And there's also 14 speakers hanging in the space, and the soundtrack goes from scene to scene to scene. So, now the thing about a sculpture this long, when you lay it flat, it's a 10:1 aspect ratio. So it's kind of challenging to design content for that. And here's some examples of the kind of content we would show on it. And you can see it's pretty low res because the thing is low res. So, but you got birds, grass, pollen, smoke, water caustics, mosquitoes, and a black hole. But even more interesting than the thing itself is the making of movie. And so the sculpture itself was built in Brooklyn at a collaborative workshop space run by Bill Washabaugh, and his company's name is Hypersonic. He's used to be a Boeing engineer. This is the prototype, the first one we built at like the 25% stage of the project, just to be proof of concept, hanging in our studio. But Bill and Hypersonic are real structural engineers. So, we like to build the like operating system and do the design and control the look and feel of the projects. But when it comes to like being the person responsible for signing off on the 3,000 pounds of glass hanging over children's heads, like we're very happy to give that to somebody else who it's their job to make sure that they're making the safest decisions. So this is the Fab Lab in Brooklyn, using a bunch of underemployed artists to put together all the circuit boards and do the soldering, the 10,000 tiny little screws. So luckily, yeah, they put in a time-lapse camera to capture most of this, but custom crates for all of the different panels that make it on the truck. So I think this is like the tallest indoor genie type thing that exists, because it can do a full 5 stories. But yeah, I mean, we don't want to be the guy at the top of that because it waves around a lot. But yeah, this was an 18-month project from kind of the start of production to turning it on. And yeah, there's just lots and lots and lots of different people involved to get it done. And unfortunately, like at the very end, when we were installing, those are sprinklers. And they were like, oh yeah, there's 2 sprinklers there. I'm like, why didn't you put them on the outside? They're like, doesn't matter, we can't move them, they're there. So it's actually missing 2 pixels at that point. So we add that to our list of things to check off on indoor installations now. It's like, please tell us where the sprinklers are. Yeah. All done. And we even left them with custom-made telescoping Swiffer things to be able to clean it. So here's the list of different companies and individuals who played important roles in making sure the thing could be built on time and on budget. Another similar indoor piece around the same time that we built is a chandelier for the Center for Strategic and International Studies. They're a think tank, a nonprofit think tank in Washington, D.C. that was in some crappy old building, but finally raised enough money to get their own building with their name in the front. And they put out a call for artists and like interior design firms to design something for their atrium space. And their logo, which is sort of generic, or this graphic feature that they repeat a lot, is this dotted map of the Earth, sort of pixelated. So we thought, the genesis of our concept for them, instead of building like signage systems or like informational LCD screens about, you know, the types of information that they deal with. These guys are interested in like global problems and solving them, things about health and energy and conflict and water scarcity and stuff like that. So we thought, oh, well, what if we use this motif and we're able to show data on those pixels of land? So, you know, have, you know, what is the water scarcity of over time in different regions? And, you know, what if we hung those dots from the ceiling of the 3rd floor and turned them each into pendant lights, and then we were showing data on this map of the Earth. So we built our own Form Explorer piece of software where we could, you know, change the waviness and the height of all of the pendant lights. So just with a bunch of sliders over here, this is Open Frameworks. I don't know if people are like familiar with the different software libraries out there, but you know, we just twiddled with the sliders over there to get the right curvature and lengths and stuff that we liked, and then we like froze it and saved it out as an XML file. And we take all the data sets that they were interested in at CSIS, things like GDP growth or water scarcity or energy consumption. And you know, their stuff exists in spreadsheet land, and we do some kind of like map distortions to get it to fit into our light dots, and basically just scale things from black to white, just as an internal data representation. And here's the control/visualization software where we can like load in data sets and play them out across the whole map. So I think this is in water scarcity mode. And so, you know, we're just writing algorithms to play back, like we're actually showing the inverse here. So like we're showing little drippies in the places that need water the most, and then the map fills in over time to the places that are the most wet. But if you start, you know, clicking and dragging across it, you can get a real-time view of what the sculpture itself would look like. And you know, this thing has a schedule throughout the day going through these different data sets. But this is the app that actually sends the signal to the lights to control them, as well as a playground where we can try out new algorithms or modifications to the map. And so that we didn't have 475 like little circle-y things in the ceiling. Like, I don't know if you see that circle. We just wanted the lines to just go straight up through the ceiling. We had to manufacture ceiling plates ourselves, and our high-tech way of testing whether or not they could withstand the loads, because those sodas are actually heavier than the pendants we built, but very rigorous testing. So in the end, you know, here's just, you can see kind of what it looks like. So these are acrylic rods, and the ends have been sandblasted, so they take up the light coming down. And the rods are of differing length, so they hang to different distances, but also the lengths are different, so that it's kind of this undulating form where the top and the bottom are two different parameters. And when you walk in the space, it just looks like a cloud from the side. You know, ground level, you just see this, you know, sort of pleasing scattering of lights, but you really have to go all the way into the basement before you realize that it is a map. And we thought, you know, we really sold that to them, but a lot of times customers, you know, they think they want the aha moment in the very beginning, but we're telling them like, no, it's actually cool if it's only on their 3rd visit here, when they go to the basement and they look up and they're like, oh, you know, we're really trying to make it be understated, because their personality is a think tank. You know, they should kind of give their visitors and the people who are going to be there the benefit of the doubt. So, oh yeah.
Is there a place that you would go at all frequently as a visitor?
You can get into the lobby, but I don't think you can get past that first floor. I mean, I think you could if you were holding a briefcase. You looked important. But if you asked, "Hi, can I go into the basement? I'm Jeff," and maybe not. But just another. That's Bill Washabon Hypersonic. They also managed all the fabrication and the ceiling plates and all that stuff. So, just another genie lift thing there. Just some photos of the installation process. Having some fun late night during installation, and then some photos. But this is kind of to sell the idea all the way in the end too. We had to get the model from the architect and insert our sculpture into it, but it was pretty satisfying. We don't do architecture as a business, so when we make a rendering beforehand and it actually looks like the ending result, we were pretty stoked. And here's the list of collaborators and people who made it happen. And in another example of just as long as we're doing oddball jobs, people who get in touch with us also ask strange things, and so we just said yes, not knowing exactly what this statement meant. And I guess we're pretty we're blessed in that way that when they think crazy, they just call us instead of some other adjective. So what this event agency had thought of to promote everything can be you can corporate sponsor anything. So the London Eye was actually the EDF Energy London Eye. They're the electricity company that provides power to London. And this event promotion agency came up with the idea of turning the London Eye into a mood ring during the Olympics to show how happy or unhappy the UK people were. And that was the extent of their brief, and so it just kind of encapsulated that idea here with the title of this article. But they didn't know how to do it, so they contacted us to figure it out. And I sort of thought at the time, I did some research, what is a mood ring? How would you be able to tell how people are feeling? And the field is sentiment analysis. And this was in early 2012 when they got in touch with us, and the field was still pretty young and not so advanced, and there's very big, expensive software packages you could get with nice Web 2.0 looking websites, and the licenses would be 50 to 100K to do pretty poor emotional analysis on raw text feeds. So we decided to go with the guy who had this awesome academic website. This is Mike Thelwall from the University of Wolverhampton in the UK, but he's a premier sentiment analysis expert, and among other fields of text-based research. But he had come up with, at the time, which was kind of the coolest algorithm called Centistrength, where he had custom dictionaries which were modifiable and gave scoring to different words and phrases. So, here's a bunch of positive words and their positive score, negative words, their negative score. He had a very extensive Emoticon Dictionary. This is pre-emoji. I'm sure his thing takes emoji into account now. And it also takes into account punctuation and booster words. So if you said very ugly, that would be doubly negative, or super awesome is double positive. And creative misspellings were also taken into account. So here's just some examples. So the ultimate goal was to be able to analyze what people in the UK were saying surrounding the Olympics and have that reflected on the London Eye in real time. So the data coming in on the left, features that are picked out, and the ultimate score that's being tallied on the right. And the concept being that as the mood of the nation changes throughout the day, we can reduce that to a simple ratio And a simplified version is, okay, if we were doing this as a pie chart, the observation wheel could have lighting like this, or you could just fade the whole thing from one color to the next. Slightly more complicated version because they're also having ground-based sky beam lights in there and central lighting, lighting that's all along the spokes and the support beams. So trying to turn this raw and yet simplified emotional data and turning it into a player piano score that could create a light show in real time. And some kind of like mood boards and storyboards here to show how that data is coming in and how we're mapping it to the lights on the eye. And also there was a kind of like decoder screen next to the eye telling you the data in real time. So you didn't just have to look at, because there's only 320 lights on each side of the eye. It's not very high resolution. And everyone was quite worried and believed that because the UK people are known to be grumpy and sarcastic, that this thing is just going to be, all downer, purple, and like just be an advertisement for how grumpy they were. But the cool thing is that at least online, and what Mike Thelwall, the professor, knew from the beginning is that in aggregate, everyone's actually very positive online. Yes, you remember the gross YouTube comments, but in general, if you look at the text among all social media and comments and everything, it's vastly positive. So here's some view of this big LED board we have, which is showing like trending positive and negative words and giving you like a real-time link between the levels of traffic, positivity, negativity, and how that's affecting the lights, and showing you where it's been over the past few minutes or days. And so this is showing positive intensity versus negative intensity, and a little insight into why yellow, why purple. Those colors are like the least represented in national flags, so we didn't want to it's a very political process of choosing these two colors, and like yellow, like a smiley, okay, good, and then purple because it's in hardly any, out of 200 country flags, it's used like 3 times. And so, yeah, like almost, I don't think ever there was more negativity than positivity, except that maybe they were tied at like 3 in the morning on some nights, just because whatever, people up that late might be, trolling, I don't know. But, in the time series representation of the data, it's cool because we did capture real events whenever they did happen. And so whenever a UK player did get a gold or any kind of medal, you would see these great spikes in positive sentiment. So, the Alistair Brownlee takes gold in men's triathlon. There's like no negativity spike there, but a big positivity one. But Victoria Pendleton, who's like a bigger, she was more of a hopeful, bigger positive spike, but also a big negative spike, probably just because she got silver and people wanted her to take gold. And just some video of the lights on the eye. So there's also a negotiation about, it has to be exciting, but it has to be, you have to understand what's happening. And those two things are totally like opposite. So if you want to be able to understand it, it's got to be a pie chart and not move. Or, just a smiley face up there, which we actually did every once in a while, because you can do two eyes and a smiley. So, you really did have to have that decoder thing next to it most of the time to understand, like, oh, that's why there's, 5 pieces of purple up there and, 9 pieces of yellow or whatever. But, the cast of characters there, and that project actually led directly into the next one I'm going to tell you about, which was getting a phone call 2 years later, like, okay, same job, but it's football instead of the Olympics, and it's the Empire State Building, except it's instead of the London Eye. So this is another architectural light show thing also,
all
I'll just
day
let them
to
speak.
vote on Twitter who is going to win the Super Bowl using the hashtag who's going to win.
Yep.
Right? The big payoff being the colors of the winning team lighting up the top of the Empire State Building.
And now we have arrived at the moment.
So, you know, football is a different aesthetic and, you know, enterprise than the Olympics. This was just Seahawks versus Broncos vote online, or, you know, vote using Twitter with a hashtag. We actually counted everything, even if you didn't use the hashtag. We could just tell if you were saying nice things about one team and the other. We didn't go into counting negative vote or negative statements. We wanted to keep the campaign positive, and Verizon paid the bill. But you know, it's good because it wasn't like we were selling Verizon phones or technology or anything. It was just they paid for a cool light show happening. So in the whole week leading up to the Super Bowl, this wasn't during the game, this was in the week leading up to it. The Super Bowl was in New York, so there was a contest every day counting everyone's tweets from that day. If, you know, we're going to call it at 7 p.m. If your team has more tweets, they get to have the light show, and then it'll stay that color of the team for until sunrise. So the payout was pretty big for the fans. And yeah, the Lombardi song. You know, I'm not like a big football guy, but by the end of the project, you know, that music got me pumped up. So, you know, an explanation slide here, just tweets coming in, and you know, Broncos are orange, Seahawks are green. So we're just detecting words and phrases. Good luck, Broncos. Seahawks, impressive victory. You know, just kind of tabulating them one versus the other. And we actually built an API, a secondary API. So we're getting tweets off the fire hose and counting every single one. But we built a secondary API so media partners, you know, blogs or ESPN or whatever can get those numbers to show in their broadcast without having to like call us on the phone. They can just hit the API and get the answers. And then also the same back end with sending lighting protocol information to the Philips color kinetic system that's installed on the top of the building. So luckily our friend lives in a building in Brooklyn, pretty high up, so he set up his GoPro one night to catch the light show. So it's static until 6 p.m. and then at some point soon it switches over. So that's the intro animation, but then we show 1 hour of real time. So like whoever is winning at that second basically gets to turn the spire green or orange. And it's hard to tell here, but there's kind of like a seesawing back and forth. We're actually like counting tweets per second to show who's in the real-time lead. And then at 7 p.m. we call it and say like, yeah, this is the Seahawks. The Seahawks won that day, and they get to keep the Empire State Building lit up for the rest of the night. And then some associated, you know, this is the decoder ring type visual that lives in the Verizon tent for people. You know, certainly like a lot of people would say online, or they were worried that people were going to say too that, oh, they're just faking it. They're just picking a winner because they can, because I don't trust corporations or whatever. So it's important to have the data there. And yes, we could have faked all of the data, but it's actually easier to just show the real stuff. So we did. And then, so here you can see in the week leading up who the winners were. And overall, they got 475,000 tweets to use the Verizon hashtag, which, you know, we're not necessarily an advertising firm, but, you know, people say that's a lot for that kind of thing. So the response there is like this whole campaign costs a lot less than doing a Super Bowl ad. The Empire State Building isn't actually allowed to charge anybody money to do a show. I think maybe they paid $1 or something. But, you know, so for a Super Bowl activation, it was pretty cheap, which was, you know, kind of astounding. But the response was even better than a typical Super Bowl ad because it was fun. You know, it's letting people, you know, sort of democratizing in the name of football, the a cool architectural landmark, and it got so much free press because it was just a fun thing to do. And Verizon got to be associated with it, and it doesn't seem like it's really an ad for LTE Advanced or anything like that. So people are happy to publish. People are happy to write the free stories about it. I'll end in one of our more recent completed projects. So this is an outdoor light sculpture, and this is one where the concept was come up with by Mi-Jin Yoon architect, husband and wife team in Boston, Howler and Yoon, and they won a public art commission at Dudley Square in Boston to, it's a T stop, a subway stop that was being totally rehabilitated, and the building was being refreshed for it was multi-use site, and there was a bunch of funding to do public art inside and outside the station. And Boston has a rich history of information conveying data in architecture, one by land, two by sea. Old North Church and the old John Hancock building, which has had this lighting installation there for 50, 60 years or something. The little mnemonic here: steady blue, clear view, flashing blue, clouds dew, steady red, rain ahead, flashing red, snow instead. So just a little weather vane. And it has a totally spastic animation if the Red Sox win. And the form of the sculpture is informed by subway station maps and timetables. And so it's this squiggly line outdoor light sculpture. And so here's the 26 neighborhoods of Boston. And you draw vertical lines for them, jiggle them around with artistic license. Roxbury is the neighborhood where the sculpture is. It's kind of centrally located in the city. And then you wrap those bent lines around a cylinder, and there's your form. So what is playing on the lights is a conversation between the populace and the city. So what it is it is displaying the real-time messages that are on the 311 Citizens Connect system. So 311 is for non-emergency service requests. Like there's a disabled car that's been sitting on the side of the road, or there's a pothole, or a tree fell over, parking meter was stolen, whatever is going on. And it's citizen reported. So now a lot of cities actually have an app to do that. So you just take a picture, oh, I see some dog poop, and then the GPS in your phone knows where it is. That goes into the system. And the city is required to respond to every request. So, they don't have to necessarily show up on site and inspect it, but they need to read and write an entry into their system to say, like, okay, we visited, we solved the problem, or we can tell from the photo that that's not a real problem, etc. And here's our favorite, just read this thing here in red. This is our favorite request that came through the data when we were working on it. So it's something that really the city should intervene in. So this one, they don't have to go to McDonald's and figure it out. They can just say, like, conflict resolved. Not a problem. So before we start writing the real software, we visualize a lot of the data. So this is like a week's worth of data. So that's like GPS coordinates of it coming in. Sort of hard to see in the contrast here, but these are the neighborhoods of Boston, showing the frequency of events coming through, the location of events, which neighborhoods have the highest density, what is the relative time density. That's a week's worth of data. You see these blank parts are the nighttime. What are the categories of data? What are the categories versus neighborhoods? South End, very many. West End, very little. And so we wanted to see what the data looked like before we built the real app that interfaced with the sculpture and did these linear animations. We wanted to see, like, is there variety? Is there, how fast do they appear? Do we need to smooth it out? Stuff like that. So that was done in JavaScript and D3. This is the real lighting control app that is Open Frameworks C++ application. So this is an unrolled elevation of the sculpture. And we have another map here of the neighborhoods of Boston. The size of the white circle in the center of the neighborhood is showing the relative activity there. So this is showing that Dorchester is especially active now, East Boston. And the color here is a key for the different kinds of requests. So trash, property, road repair, graffiti, etc. And those are the different colored events coming through here. So we're mapping different neighborhoods to the different parts of the sculpture. So East Boston, West Roxbury, and you see Dorchester here. When I turn off, or essentially turn on the entire pixel map, we're just drawing into a big rectangle, shapes, colors, stuff, and then we're masking out the points of the sculpture that don't really exist and just capturing the colors and the pixels on that larger 2D bitmap and playing it on the sculpture. So kind of a, somewhere between a dumb and a smart mapping system here. And so, the different kinds of events that come through the system have different kinds of animations. And right here, we're showing them in kind of different rainbow colors. We actually tightened the palette a lot more because we didn't want it to look so rainbow in real life. But as a kind of debug view, we can see like, oh, okay, well, there's garbage events in this neighborhood and graffiti events in this other neighborhood. So here's some kind of prototype tests of the cut aluminum tubing and what the lights look like inside it. When you're installing something that's 40 feet tall in a public place, things have to pass through a structural engineer. And so the architects designed the sculpture and then had to get it approved, and they put it through finite element analysis. And because it was perforated and because they were kind of placed in this triangular shape and only touching each other, at the bottom they did wind studies, and the structural engineer said, well, this sculpture is going to suffer from vortex shedding, and nobody in the room knew what that was. And they're like, let me pull up a video on YouTube. So at exactly 22 miles an hour, your sculpture is going to do this. And it might not break, but it's going to scare everybody. So you need to redo the design. And luckily that was on the architects. The architects had to go and put in more reinforcing braces and totally redo their perforation pattern because it was kind of like a, like a flute. It just had like tons of holes in it, which caught the wind a lot more than a sleek, just a regular pole. But here's some video of it. And this is, most of this stuff is on our website to see. So hopefully this can survive all of the snow that Boston gets. Everything's totally outdoor rated and was built to specification to be able to handle any kind of weather events, but we'll see. This is our first permanent outdoor thing that we've helped design from the ground up. So I'm definitely curious. Things here, you can leave neon signs outdoors here and they're fine, but developing for other environments is trickier for sure. But it hasn't broken yet, which is good. So I'm at the end of my talk. That's the most recent thing we have. So I'm definitely here for questions if people have, want to know more, curious about things, and follow us on Twitter or your social media of choice. Thanks, everybody.